Hello everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today. My name is Alex Bambo. I'm a marketing manager here at LexisNexis Canada, and I welcome you all to the Justice Adapting the British Columbia Practitioners webinar. As COVID-19 events continue to unfold, LexisNexis Canada is working to support the legal community by providing free legal news, analysis, and other key resources specifically geared to support your decision-making and counsel on COVID-19 matters. The LexisNexis Coronavirus landing page provides a document kit that can be downloaded for free. Existing Lexis Practice Advisor customers can access this information within the product through the COVID-19 pod. Access this content at lexisnexis.ca/COVID-19. Today's webinar will now begin. I'd like to introduce the moderator for today, Felix Evans, LexisNexis Practice Area Consultant.
Thank you, Alex, and good morning, everyone, and welcome again to the COVID-19 Justice Adapting webinar series. This webinar is part of a series of discussions we are presenting across Canada to bring the legal community together in a sharing of updates and information about how lawyers, the law societies, and the courts are and have been adapting to the pandemic. This will be a brief introduction. We only have 1 hour. Today, we're fortunate enough to have with us on our panel 3 experienced practitioners from British Columbia. Leena Yousefi, founder of the YLaw group, Katherine McNeill, associate at BLG in the corporate and commercial group, and James Speakman, the managing partner of Clark Wilson. I'm certain everyone listening already recognizes the unprecedented impact this pandemic has had on our justice system, and we recognize that the situation is changing rapidly and the information we have is still in flux. We believe open lines of communication are key to ensuring the justice system and its participants remain resilient and adaptive to the challenges ahead. And we greatly appreciate the panelists taking the time to join us today. The format of the discussion will take the form of a question I will ask to the panel and invite each panelist to weigh in on that issue. For any lawyers in the audience, this webinar is accredited for 1 hour of CPD credit under practice management, which can be claimed through the BC Law Society. The course is pre-created and pre-approved and entitled Webinar Justice Adapting the Practitioners. So with that, I will ask our panelists to give a brief introduction to themselves and their firm and/or practice, and then we will move after that into the first question. So I'll just go in the order that I can see on the screen right now. So Leena, if you wouldn't mind giving a brief introduction.
My name is Leena Yousefi, and I'm a family lawyer of YLaw Group, which is a boutique firm with offices in Vancouver and Surrey. We have about 7 lawyers, so I'm considered a small firm, and we've been in business for almost 7 years.
Okay, thank you very much. And James, the same for yourself, please.
Sure. I'm James Speakman. I'm the managing partner of Clark Wilson LLP in Vancouver. We are 95 lawyers and about 270 people altogether. Our firm's been in existence in Vancouver since 1910, so we are in our 110th year.
Wow. Happy birthday. And the same question to Katherine, please.
I'm an associate in the corporate commercial group at Borden, Ladner, Gervais. We are a national full-service firm and do everything except for criminal and family law. And I've been with BLG since 2014.
Thank you very much. With that, we'll move into the first question. I'll reverse the order and start off with Katherine, please. What is your general experience since the start of the crisis for your legal practice?
Yeah, our firm was really lucky that we had all the technology in place already, so we were able to move pretty quickly to a remote working environment. I think March 13th was my last day in office, and by the next Monday, it looked like the Grinch had stolen Christmas in my office, just, you know, a few wires dangling. And since then, internally, we've seen a huge show of unity. We've done a lot of firm-wide initiatives to stay connected when we can't physically see each other, and also some internal social initiatives as well. And externally, we saw initially a little bit of an adaptation as our clients adjusted to the new normal, but slowly starting to see business as usual. And of course, some projects and some work has been canceled like we've all experienced, but we're also seeing a lot of interesting work come up now that's either related or unrelated to COVID-19.
Okay, thank you very much. And the same question around general experience for the practice to James, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd echo a lot of what Katherine just said. Our firm also transitioned very quickly from working on site to working remotely. It took us about 3 or 4 working days to get, we moved out in groups and get everybody out over 3 or 4 working days. Generally, the experience of the operating remotely has been really positive. People have all pitched in, and the clients have, I think, noticed a relatively seamless transition. We also have lots of structured, socialized events virtually, as well as a lot of informal people connecting with each other. Production's been fine. We're as productive as we have been. Bills are going out. People are paying their bills. So generally, it's been pretty seamless and very positive.
Okay, thank you. And the same question to Leena, please.
Obviously, like when COVID started, I think there was this general massive anxiety that was going through every single person that I know, including myself. So there was an initial pause to a lot of things that we were doing, and there was like a period of having to quickly readjust. I share my colleagues' thoughts that the transition from office to virtual was quite seamless. The challenge became, how do we change our practice and our services and what we're offering to clients so that we can have a steady inflow of clients, because a lot of our services, just like the other firms, had to be canceled, sometimes for the simple reason that courts were pretty much closed. So it's been a pretty steep learning curve, but at the end of the day, I think what's come out of it has been quite positive.
Okay, thank you very much. And before we move on to the next question, I just wanted to mention the chat or the Q&A function is open. So if anyone does have any questions, I can't guarantee that we'll definitely be able to get to all of them. But if there are some that we can address towards the end, if you have questions, please do submit those, and we will do our best. It is open. So the second question, and I'll put this out to James first, if I may, which is, did you, or this could be the firm as well, have to learn new software and technology because of the situation? Has there been a need to provide new equipment in order to enable working from home practices? And has the transition from office to home been easy for your employees and you?
Sure. Well, starting with technology, we've got a really strong technology group, and they always have access to a whole variety of different softwares. But certainly myself and many of the lawyers had to get familiar quickly with things like this Zoom or Teams or GoToMeeting or BlueJean or whatever other sort of visual and online meeting process we're going to use. And so lawyers had a steep learning curve. Fortunately, software is set up for people even like myself who are dinosaurs to learn how to use it. So, but our technology group was really supportive, and they already had access to this stuff and knew how it worked. So, in terms of providing equipment to staff, yeah. So some staff, some people just didn't have laptops, and so we provided laptops to our staff members who didn't have them, in order to allow them to access the office over the Citrix. Many lawyers seem to have helped themselves, either with notice or without notice, to monitors or printers or things like that. So as we start the process of moving back to the office, our systems team has sort of had to go through and do a bit of an inventory to see what might have gone missing from offices that has to come back as people come back. to the office. But we are hoping that it's all going to be, it's all been put to good use, and that it will come back. And frankly, we had a bunch of extra monitors that some people just took, which we were trying to figure out what to do with anyway. So that worked out well. Is the transition between working in the office to working from home easy for the employees and me? Well, for me, it was easy. I'm lucky that I have space at home, and our children are grown, so I don't have those distractions. My wife works as well, but there's room for her to be in a separate space. So it was easy. I think for some of our people, maybe many of our people, the transition is not technology problem as much as it's a space and people problem. And so I'm lucky that I have lots of space, but we have employees and associates, I think, I know, who have less space and who I get on Zooms with, and I see, you know, other adults going back and forth if they're just living in a house with a bunch of people, or I see kids going back and forth, and I know those are distractions. So I think the transition to moving out was easy. Actually, working in a confined space is not the same for every different person, and it's easier for some other than others, and we'll take that into consideration as we start slowly in pieces coming back to the office.
Thank you very much. And same question to Leena, please.
Has the transition been easy? I would say, like, as far as equipment and, you know, physical stuff goes, yes. Of course, it's been easy. You know, like, we're a smaller firm, so we're not so structured. People just came and took desks and chairs and whatever they needed, you know, like we're pretty easygoing about that. And unfortunately, I had ordered a massive supply of pretty high-end furniture that came in boxes, and we haven't even opened the boxes because COVID happened. And why do you need to do that? But the transition emotionally, I think it's been challenging because we have a little community. We're a small firm, and, you know, we're all pretty much friends, and going to work for us was like going home and just, you know, seeing another family. The breakdown of that, at least, you know, on an in-person basis, has been tough, at least for me. Like, I miss seeing people, and we do have our, you know, Zoom meetings. By the way, I heard Zoom is not secure, and neither is Google Meets. We need to go on Microsoft Teams, which is encrypted, by the way, all lawyers, because if you get subpoenas, they get subpoenaed, they're gonna send all their recordings, and everything that we're doing that is being recorded. So, but in any event, so that was a bit difficult. And for senior lawyers, I found that we all had our own clientele, and so we continued with our files. But for some junior lawyers who were working behind the scenes or didn't have enough clients, you know, getting them new clients was a bit difficult. And, you know, naturally, when you don't have work up to here and you're sitting at home, it's pretty easy to, you know, like go for exercise or watch TV or whatever. It's not like you're at the firm and you're being watched. So, you know, it took initiative by everybody to stay motivated and to continue talking about, you know, how we're feeling and how we're going to do this together. So, you know, it was challenging, but I felt like by now, like, we have grown stronger as a team because there's been a huge involvement of everyone in our planning process, which wasn't the case before. It was just me and my partner, but now everybody's kind of chipping in and people are starting to feel more involved, which I think has been very positive.
Thank you very much. And the same question to Katherine as well, just around the software and technology, any new equipment and the transition.
Not to echo the others, but I would say the same sentiments. We already had the technology in place. It was just a matter of getting more comfortable using it. It's pretty easy to ignore that when you have everything you need in the office, but happily have become very proficient with WebEx and Jabber recently. We, like Leena said, we also have some concerns about confidential communications in Zoom, but we've found that's been very helpful socially, and we'll use that from time to time based on client instructions and consent. But I think by far and large, the most challenging element of transitioning is not technology, but it's the other side. It's that delineation between office time and home time that I think a lot of my colleagues are finding really challenging.
Thank you very much. And I think many people at LexisNexis have also found that as well, and I'm sure across organizations across Canada and the world. The next question is, this might be related to the one we just dealt with, so there may or may not be many additional thoughts, but this is just around sharing any experiences and best practices that you have had working with other users, other administrative personnel and other employees at the firm working remotely, and in conjunction with that, operating with any research services with the libraries being closed. And maybe we'll start with Katherine for that one.
I think for me, I found a best practice is not much has really changed from being in the office, but just early and open communication as much as possible. It's a lot harder to respond to a last minute request when you're hours away from closing a transaction. And the more notice, the better. And on another more personal note, I think I found it's really beneficial to start all my communications with other colleagues, and this is firm-wide, just on a bit of a personal level. It's so important right now to maintain personal connections, and I find it really helps to just chat a little bit before getting down to business.
Thank you. And same question to Leena, please.
I found, like, the libraries being closed, I don't remember the last time I actually went to a library. Everything I've been doing since law school has been to use LexisNexis softwares and, you know, like, find my stuff from the comfort of my office or home. And I don't recall any of our lawyers having stepped into a library unless they have to print something in the middle of a court hearing. So I haven't noticed any changes. We haven't had to make any adjustments as far as personally going to places go. Everything did happen online before, and we had this big thing towards going paperless from a few years ago, and I'm glad that we implemented that, because going paperless means that you have to kind of force yourself to be on your computer and not walk to the printer or hand things over to people. You had to find a way to deliver things through just the computer. So as far as that goes, it's been quite seamless. I haven't actually had to make any adjustments.
Thank you very much. And same question to James, please, around the firm's experience with administrative personnel and research services.
Sure. I just quickly on the research side, I'm with Leena. I imagine that all of the research is done electronically, and so whether the physical plant of the library is closed or not, I don't think that's impacted our ability to do research at all. In terms of it working with administrative personnel and others in the office, I think communication and just reaching out and as many touch points as possible is really key. You know, we have all of our practice groups are conducting weekly or semi-weekly or 3 times a week meetings with on Zoom or by phone or whatever with all of the people in their group, the staff and the lawyers. We have once a week, we've got an all partner meeting, we've got an all staff meeting, we've got an all associates meeting, and our HR group is reaching out to all of the staff, hopefully weekly, just to stay in touch. And personally with my assistant, I talk to her throughout the day. She's over in Vancouver and I'm here in North Van, and it'd be way better if I could see her face to face and have those discussions. But I just think as many touch points as possible in communication, which is not electronic communication if possible, but is not written, you know, it's like verbal communication face to face on a Zoom or over the phone is just key to working with people.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we do have some good questions coming in actually, and one of them I think I'm going to tie in to the next question, and hopefully that's okay with all of our panelists. I think they are related. So the initial question was, how do you manage client emergencies, and perhaps as part of that, a definition of client emergencies. And there is a question that has come in around, how do you communicate with clients now? And do you have any privacy or data security concerns about the channels that you are using? And you know, there might be an extent to which you can or cannot answer some of those aspects. but if we could add that in, so managing client emergencies and communication channels generally with clients and any privacy data security concerns. So I'll pose that to James initially, please.
Sure. Well, my definition of a client emergency is whatever the client thinks is an emergency. That really drives the urgency of every matter. Is what does the client think, and how do we deal with those? We deal with them the same way we've dealt with them before. You stay in touch with the client either by phone or by email, and you respond to them as quickly as you can to assure them that we're on it, and you get the task done. So really, this remote working hasn't changed any of that. How we deal with clients, we deal with them by phone or by email. Occasionally, I've had a Zoom or a FaceTime call with the client. Those are really pretty limited in terms of the substance of them. It's more just to stay in touch and get, to get some clarity. But client emergencies, client matters, none of that, how we deal with that has changed fundamentally just because we're all working remotely.
Okay, thank you very much. And Leena, perhaps I'll go to you next.
In the family law realm, every client thinks everything is an emergency, and 99% of what they think is an emergency is not an emergency. And that hasn't changed. What has changed is that, our courts are actually taking only emergency hearings. So if somebody calls and says, I need to get this house sold, I can't deal with that emergency by running to court. I have to explain to them that you have to wait, or we have to try mediation or arbitration and things like that. The closure of the courts, though, have allowed us as lawyers to tend to clients a lot quicker, because it's not like, you all of a sudden have an application and you have to spend all your time preparing this application and you have to brush everybody to the side. Because you don't have those applications, you can actually tend to a lot of inquiries, urgent or not, on a daily basis a lot quicker. And I've noticed that clients are happier because they hear back from us a lot quicker. I do try as hard as I can, and this is going to be something that may be more challenging for ladies, because it's a lot easier to have a crazy hair day and no makeup and get on the phone and talk to a client than to actually schedule a Zoom meeting, which means you have to go take your showers and do your hair and, so obviously it takes a lot more effort, but in family law is obviously very emotional. So I found it very helpful when I see the client on the screen and I can see their body language and their, what they're trying to relate to me is a lot more effective, and so is my advice. So even in the case of emergency, I know it's very easy to pick up the phone, but I actually try to do a virtual meeting and very calmly explain to them, what the next steps are. And as far as court emergencies, there are specific criteria for what is urgent. And, we have obviously received a lot of inquiries for denial of parenting time because of COVID, or somebody not paying support because of COVID and loss of employment and things like that. And it's really been a walk in the park because the courts are so empty right now. You ask to have a hearing heard, and within an hour you get a hearing date, which is going to be in a couple days, and you don't have to go to chambers and sit for 6 hours and hope that you get heard. So in some ways, I tell some of the clients, this is actually a good time to start an action, because you don't really have to wait, and there's going to be a judge who's going to be super happy to have something to do, because generally it seems like they're just waiting for something to come through the doors.
Thank you very much. And the same question to Katherine, please, around client emergencies and communication channels.
Mm-hmm. In the corporate commercial context, which is my practice area, emergencies look a little bit different from Leena's. I would probably define an emergency as any time-sensitive matter that a client needs our help on. And in the corporate commercial context, we've seen a lot of closings that we've done since we moved to a remote working environment. And in that context, it's been absolutely critical to think about and just line up as many pieces of the puzzle as you can beforehand, putting teams in place and resources in place so that by the time the closing is happening, you're not scrambling and you already have everyone in place to get that deal over the finish line. Another area we've seen it a lot, a large portion of my practice is privacy law. And we've seen a lot of time-sensitive privacy matters related to COVID-19. For example, an employee of an organization has been exposed to COVID, and then the employer is working with us to determine how to balance the privacy concerns about that individual with public health guidance, and also the health and safety of other employees and customers in the organization. And a lot of those matters are obviously very time sensitive, so we've seen a big uptake in those. In terms of managing them, again, nothing really changes from being in the office. We're trying to provide as prompt and good service as we can, and sometimes it takes a little bit advanced planning to the extent that we can, but the underlying principles, nothing really changes from that.
Okay, thank you very much. And our next question, actually, I think there's some relationship to some points that Leena was making. So I'll start with yourself, Leena, which is, have you been participating in virtual hearings, and particularly with any witnesses, and how has that experience been? And this question actually we already had, but it also came in from an audience member as well.
I have, and to my surprise, I found it so much better in so many ways. And I'm just going to point from it. Number one, because you're either in a virtual hearing or over the phone, you don't interrupt each other. So like in a lot of hearings, counsel can get excited or get up and object, and then you lose where you were going with your submissions, and the judge gets angry and says, like, sit down. So in phone or virtual hearings, because of the technology, it makes people a little bit nervous. So they just kind of wait for their turn before saying anything. And that makes things a lot more orderly and organized. The other thing is, especially like for litigators, I find that the stress levels are a lot lower, because you're not you know that there's not a gallery of lawyers and people sitting behind you judging everything you're saying and giving, thinking like whether you should win or lose. And, I guess it's private. It's between you and the judge and, the other lawyers. So I found those two aspects quite good. And I don't think that the in-person versus virtual is that much more advantageous. I think your submissions, your body language, like your voice, everything that you need the judge to see or hear is still there. But the advantage is you're not wasting your client's money for hours, sitting down to have your matter called. You're sitting at the comfort of your office working on other files, so you're not charging this client. And when the court is ready, they call you. So I really think this is something that should be implemented for our, short chambers hearings or whatever in the future. And I was also participating on an appeal hearing virtually. I wasn't the appeal counsel, but I was participating still, and it just went without a hitch. And I found that it was even better than doing appeal in person. But that's just my personal opinion.
Thank you very much. And interestingly, we do have a question around around hopes for how the courts might adapt in the short and long term. So perhaps we'll circle back to that one in a little bit. For now, I think Katherine, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think you're as involved in litigation, but if you have any thoughts to add to that one, please go ahead.
It's not my wheelhouse, but I understand at BLG, we've been doing virtual arbitrations, depositions, hearings, tribunal hearings, or exploring a lot of different options.
Okay, thank you very much. And James, I don't know if you'd like to speak perhaps to the firm's, the litigation team and their experience with virtual hearings.
Yeah, it's not part of my practice. I'm a real estate lawyer. It's not part of my practice. I know our litigators are involved in virtual hearings. I just think it's remarkable and gratifying how quickly the courts have transitioned to this after years and years of avoiding this, the idea of a virtual hearing. Or, I mean, if it can continue in this way and we can get rid of the backlog in the courts, I think it would be a wonderful positive outcome from this current situation, because they've been pretty loath to adapt, and we see a bunch of adaptation now from the courts, which is a wonderful thing.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, and apologies, I lost my question for a second there. This is a more general question. Do you, each panelist, think that the way of practicing during this crisis will change some processes or best practices in the firm? And there was a question actually that came in around whether you would see occasional work from home to be a viable option for lawyers moving forward, which I think is quite related. So I'll add that in. Do you think this way of practicing during the crisis will change processes and best practices in your firm? And do you think that work from home as part of that will be an option for lawyers moving forward? And perhaps we'll start with James this time, if I may.
Sure, thanks. Absolutely. This experience will change practices, best practices in our firm, processes. We already were doing our best, and almost all of the firm were electronic, paperless, electronic filing, electronic, document and all that. There were a few groups that insisted on using paper, and I hope that they use this opportunity to transition to a paperless process in their groups. We've got some practices around moving money through trust accounts and for paying bills that by necessity have changed a bit, or the pace of change of that has accelerated because of this. And I think that will be part of our best practices moving forward. And I'm excited about that because I think many firms that do commercial work struggle with the various positions from the banking community on moving money. And if we can use this as a way to develop our best practices, then that will be a positive outcome. We always had the opportunity for people to work remotely, although it wasn't taken up a lot. I do think that we've realized that it's not as big a bugaboo as we thought it might have been, that it is possible for people to work remotely and to get productive legal work accomplished. The concern I have, and I've shared this with others before, the concern I have with everybody working remotely all the time is that what lawyers do is we come up with creative solutions to people's problems. We deal with hard questions. We're expensive, and people hire us because they expect us to have a creative answer to their problem. The best answers come when people are standing around a coffee machine, or someone happens by a senior lawyer's office and asks them a question. The best answers to problems come through collective thought, and I think in person. And I think the technology companies in the Bay Area feel the same way, because for a long time they were sending their people home, and now until this happened, they were asking for their people to come back because they want to develop new products and come up with new ideas. And so I've always been concerned, whether we're talking about a remote office or talking about remote work, I've always been concerned about how we can create the collisions that happen informally in our office to allow people to have those informal discussions and come up with creative solutions that justify what we charge if we're not working together in person. And we're starting to think about that now, having for 8 weeks set up formal group meetings and partner meetings and staff meetings, and realizing that that doesn't create those informal collisions, shall we call them. We're now looking at ways to formalize what would otherwise be an informal collision process with practice groups, because I still think there's the transition of mentoring and the transition of information from a senior lawyer to a junior lawyer. It's imperative that we continue to have those opportunities, and I don't yet see that happening in a remote environment. So that's the best practice we're going to have to figure out if everyone's not going to work together.
Thank you very much for those very interesting points, which I think are applicable to other organizations as well. And Katherine, if you could speak to that one as well, please.
I think some of the benefits of all this is remote working is very feasible. We've acknowledged that it's doable and we can do it fairly seamlessly. I think there's a less of a concern that lawyers or staff will move to entirely remote working arrangements. I miss my colleagues dearly, and I think a lot of my colleagues are also sharing that sentiment, and also just having the separation of work and home is nice to have. But just being able to have that in your back pocket or an option, or a couple days here and there working remotely, and we've shown that we can do it. And everyone's had to get used to those technologies that you need to have to be able to work remotely. And we've all worked out the kinks together now. So that's a very, very feasible option. On a bit of an environmental note, Leena mentioned that her office is already paperless, and James did as well. And this has been great for actually forcing us to go paperless. We've had the best of intentions prior to COVID-19, but this is really reinforced that you don't actually need to reflexively hit the print button on everything, and everything is feasible on a screen. And so that's been a nice ancillary benefit. I also just really want to echo James' sentiment about mentorship and those informal, intangible relationships of having a brick and mortar office. And that's something that is absolutely invaluable. And so I think that's something that will preclude entire remote working environments, but is also something that we've really tried to focus on and emphasize and prioritize in more official ways as well, while we are all working remotely.
Thank you very much. And same question to Leena, please, around whether this will change processes and best practices moving forward.
I think one, as far as I did see a couple questions, I think this goes practices as far as marketing practices go, because I think James covered the concern regarding remote work within the firm. But as far as marketing and business goes, given what has happened in COVID, one of the positive things that has come out and I think should be followed is that this is not the time for firms to try and even advertise. This is the time for firms to give information and to be sympathetic and have compassion for the general public out there who also don't know what's going on. Like a lot of problems are coming up because of COVID, which a lot of people don't have answers to. So like in a situation like that, where people are already mentally not the happiest with the most amount of money, going out there and doing the traditional advertising, in magazines or online or whatever, I feel is not going to help firms at this time or even in the future to attract clients the way they did before. So one of the practices that we have followed is we've tried to stay away from focusing on how many inquiries or clients we're going to get, and instead we've shifted our focus on giving information, whether that's interviewing, giving interviews to the media, to different magazines, writing blogs, giving tips to parents and whoever is dealing with the situation and they don't have money to pay a lawyer. We also at some point started giving some free consults without anything more, like no strings attached, when in fact previously our practice was definitely to charge for consults at all times. So because of that, you start creating a reputation as a firm that cares as well as wants to have a business. And when you create that reputation and trust for the people who come and read the information you've given, it's easier for them now or later when the situation is better to come back to you and say, hey, I read this piece that you wrote. And I pause here to really thank Clark Wilson for sending weekly emails to firms like mine, covering different practice areas and giving the latest information on COVID and how to deal with X, Y, and Z, which I as a lawyer find very, very, very helpful, let alone the general public who might actually be dealing with these issues. So one of the practice, I really think there should be a shift and time investment for firms to go online and start giving out information and trying to help people. As much as obviously, it doesn't translate to money, I think in the future, it's a long-term investment that is going to pay off.
And a bit touching on Leena's point, one other thing that I've seen that maybe is less of a tangible best practice for law firms is humanity. I've seen a lot of recognizing that safety and health is most important, and we all want to develop business and we all want to provide excellent client service. But at the end of the day, health and safety is the most important. And we've seen a lot of reaching out to clients, and there's an enormous sentiment that everyone cares. And I think that's been really lovely.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, you know, I think it was remarkable in the middle of March, certainly with the downtown Vancouver firms, that, you know, we didn't have to be told by the public health officer that the best practice would be to get out of Dodge and go to remote practice. And I think one reason that lawyers ended up being an essential service is that they saw, those who were making that decision saw that, at least for, you know, obviously things like family and criminal would be essential anyway, but for the work that Katherine would do, they saw the law firms were acting really responsibly anyway, in terms of looking out for the people internally and externally by moving remotely, closing your office, you know, reducing social interactions and things like that. And of course, there's other things that many firms are doing, whether it's charitable or otherwise, to show their concern for the community at large. And lawyers have always done this, you know. People make lawyer jokes, but one of the great lines about lawyers is what, you know, if you go to a board meeting of a community organization on a Wednesday night, most of the people around the board would be a lawyer giving their time back to the community. So just another example of that.
Thank you all very much for those insightful answers. And there's we had come to the sort of last question on the list that we had, and I think we've already had some really great thoughts around this, but I will put it out there, and I'll add to it one of the questions that we've received from the audience, and I think we'll probably have some time for a couple of others as well. So the pre-existing question was, broadly, what do you think the impacts of this situation will be for the future? But specific to that, and maybe this will be the wider question we haven't answered as much, how do you hope that the courts will adapt to this pandemic, both in the short term and the long term? Perhaps, I don't know, if, Leena, would you like to go first on this one?
I think at the LexisNexis seminar, the chief justices of the three courts said that, you know, there has been a move for the last 3-4 years to obviously bring the courts more in line with technology, but there's been some, you know, budget problems, and the hands of the judges are pretty much tied because, you know, obviously they need budget and money and the government to support them. So I think the intention is there, the motivation is there, and, you know, they made it very clear that the judges are not resistant to technology. In fact, they want to use technology, and it's that they just don't have the resources to implement those technologies. So, and, you know, I read in the news that the Attorney General has agreed that, you know, this issue needs to be addressed and quickly. So, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think by now, all of us, including judges and the government and everybody, has seen the issues with technology and the justice system, and I'm quite confident that with such intelligent, incredible minds in our court system and their absolute empathy for self-represented litigants or access to justice and the amount of money people have to spend to get heard, I think I'm extremely optimistic that in short and long term, we are going to see a big shift, which may not be very comfortable at the beginning, but I really don't see the courts continuing what we were doing before the pandemic, because we were already having problems and then they just came to the spotlight. So long and short of it, I do think that there's going to be some really positive, efficient changes in our court system so that we can all be proud, hopefully.
Thank you very much. And James, I think you had some thoughts on a little bit on this earlier as well, if you'd like to expand on those at all.
Well, I don't have anything to add on the court side because it's not part of my practice. But in terms of impacts of this pandemic for the future, in terms of law firms, the obvious one, of course, is how we use our office space and what does that look like. You know, there has been a trend over the last 5 or 7 years towards open concept offices. Accountants do it, and engineering firms do it, and a few firms in Vancouver have done it. I think that's going to be looked at a little more closely. How much office space we need for the number of people we have will depend on how many people decide to work remotely part of the time or all of the time. As I said, I think in our firm, we're going to try to have people spend at least part of their time, I think, in the office or otherwise create opportunities for what I would call collisions. More and more people will go paperless. The electronic movement of money and the processes for moving money and the Law Society rules and the bank rules, which are just a morass of complexity for those that deal with trust accounting, will hopefully, change a bit to reflect the reality of what we have to go through. So I think more client meetings virtually rather than people coming. I think we'll require, and it will also be the result of social norms, that we'll see fewer client meetings in our office space. We won't want to introduce as many people that we don't know and where they've been and what they've been doing to our home, and they'll want also be reluctant to perhaps get out and come to an office when they can do it remotely. So that would be another big space. How much space we need to devote to meeting rooms might be something to think about in the future.
Thank you very much. And finally to Katherine, on your thoughts on any impacts of this situation for the future.
I absolutely agree with James. I think we're going to see a huge trend toward reimagining office space. Offices are going to be reassessed, and there might be a move toward more fluid workstations, flexible work from home arrangements, a smooth transition from my office at BLG to my home office. I think all of those things will become very fluid and very flexible, and will just facilitate working in a way that works best for the individual rather than a set idea of what your office or what your workday should look like. I think on a more personal level, it's also a huge takeaway from this has been the resiliency of staff members and fellow legal professionals and clients. This has been an enormous crisis, and it's been heartening to see across the board everyone adjust to a new normal, and there's a very real sense that we're all in this together and we care about each other and we're just doing our best. And I think that's just a really lovely thing to see.
Thank you very much. And before we move on, we do have some audience questions that I think we have a few minutes for. And I'll just mention, since Leena mentioned it, so I just wanted to mention with regards to the courts adapting. LexisNexis did produce a webinar recently, and we had presenting on exactly that issue, the chief judge and the two chief justices of the Provincial Supreme and Court of Appeal. And we will send the link out if anyone is interested in viewing that recording. We will send the link out in our follow-up emails. And with that, I think I can pose this question, which was the first question that we received actually. And I'll just pose it an open question to whoever would like to dive in. Understanding that it's never one size fits all, can you give some examples of social events at your firm and any recommendations to others?
I'll go first. I'm sure Catherine's got lots to say. She looks like she's eager to get on this one. But we have Friday, a Friday social every week, and beer and wine and whatever else, and that has continued online through Zoom. In fact, last Friday we did it a little bit earlier, and we had a talent show. A few lawyers performed, and many lawyers had their children perform gymnastics or singing or dancing or all sorts of different things. So that was really entertaining, and it got a lot of our staff involved as well, because their kids participated in the talent show. I know different practice groups have done social things. Our real estate practice group yesterday, the lawyers got together for some online games, which one of the people organized was quite fun. We did an hour of kind of trivia and murder mystery type games, which was lots of fun. So we're finding ways to and there are smaller groups I know that do their own connections for a beer on a Friday afternoon outside of the larger thing. So we're doing our best. The talent show, I imagine we'll replicate that. I think that as lawyers being as competitive as they are, it wouldn't surprise me as some of our more talented people decide to compete against those that already performed. So.
I'm very curious about these talents. Similar thing happening at BLG. We've done a lot of practice-specific happy hours. The corporate commercial group at BLG has been doing a weekly happy hour on Thursday evenings, and we'll pick a theme. One of the themes was an influential band or music, some sort of music that has really left an impact on you, and then everyone would pick a background, pick a virtual Zoom background, and it's quite the icebreaker. And another one was everyone's a favorite baby picture of yours, which led to hilarious results. And then just also some informal things. I've really tried to pick up the phone and FaceTime when I want to go chat to another lawyer rather than firing off an email, just to maintain that sense of normalcy that you get from a pop by in somebody's office if we were back in the office.
I don't really have much to add. We do our Zoom meetings. You guys have a lot. I took some notes from your ideas and whatever you're doing. We're usually like, how's everybody doing? And we did have our happy hours. They kind of went sideways because I bought it. We have a cabin, and anyway, the timing is not working. But yeah, we also focus on how are you feeling today? How has the week been? You know, like, are there any concerns? Is there anything you want to share? Because, you know, I feel like it's very important to keep the conversation going and just kind of like show your vulnerable human side as you're going through the pandemic, and to share any concerns, because I feel like, especially for, you know, partners or law firm owners or whatever, especially staff and some lawyers, they need to get that security and that reassurance from us. They need to hear that it's going to be okay, because there's so much uncertainty. They want to know, what are your plans? Are you going to be pulling through this storm? Am I going to get laid off? Like, they also need to make plans. So I felt that it was really important to continue reassuring people and continuing to hear them and to address any issues that they may have, so that we can pull through this together. So a part of our Zoom meetings are not about business stuff. It's more about the human side of us and you know, how we can kind of move through this as a team.
Thank you all very much. And Leena, actually, your comments there were sort of addressing a different question that had come in, which I don't know if anyone else would like to speak to at all, which is, have any employees or lawyers raised any concerns of mental health issues, such as anxiety, financial concerns, and so on? And if so, how has the firm been addressing these kinds of issues?
I'll say that our firm has, for the last couple of years, been really active on mental health. We've been doing sort of not feeling myself this week or today a week, and other initiatives of the Canadian Mental Health Association. We've been participating in those. As part of that, I think I mentioned before that our HR department, the people there are reaching out to everybody by phone, hopefully at least once a week, and if not, you know, then probably every second week, to check in on them, with particular reference to people that they know are on their own and don't have family living with them, and who might be more at risk for anxiety or depression. So that, whether that's lawyer partners or associates or staff or whatever. So we do have quite a formal process for trying to stay in touch with people and monitoring, and we're really aware of mental health. It's been an initiative of the firm for the last couple of years.
Okay, thank
Something
you.
Very similar at, sorry, something very similar at BLG. We've had formal mental health initiatives for a number of years, and there's been a bit of an uptick and emphasis on recirculating materials and resources that can be used, and also the informal checking in. The number of partners that have just called me to chat about how my practice is going and how the day is going, it's those informal touch points really go such a long way. And I think everyone's emphasis on making sure to reach out, and even though it's not necessary, it's just important from a unity perspective and a social perspective. Those things go a really long way right now.
I've been encouraging some of our people, like, you know, even just one person a day to actually come to the office, because our office is now pretty much empty. So at any given time of the day, maybe there's, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 people, and, you know, all the guidelines that have been given will be followed. And, you know, I feel like when you stay at home for that long stretch of time, and especially in cases where the person is single, living on their own, and they're kind of like, you know, in their own world and afraid of stepping out, sometimes encouraging them to step out and just come to the office for half an hour, have a conversation, just talk about what's going on. There is a little bit of a discomfort at the beginning, but once they do make their way to the office and spend an hour there, they feel a lot better. Because at the end of the day, we all need a human connection. Like, you can go so far as virtual meetings go and phone calls go, but there's nothing, absolutely nothing like in-person connections. And sometimes the anxiety and the paranoia of you know, the virus and this mental state of I have to stay at home really does wonders as far as emotional damage goes. So we're definitely starting slow, but you know, as long as we're following the guidelines, personally, I have been encouraging people one at a time to come to the office.
Okay, thank you very much. And we are at the hour now, and I think that's a really insightful and some really positive notes to end on. If our panelists have any other final comments that they would like to make, I'll just invite any of you to make those now. No compulsion.
I wanted to say, for all the firms or the lawyers, the one sector of our community that we may not be thinking about that much are articling and law students. And unfortunately, they're finding themselves in a situation where nobody's hiring, obviously, and, you know, a lot of people are even getting laid off. So these people, you know, like, they're thinking they spent so much money and time and investment to go to law school and, you know, had all these hopes and dreams, and they're in the middle of a pandemic where law firms are struggling just to keep their own staff and lawyers. So, you know, I have been talking to a lot of law students and, you know, trying to like encourage them and tell them what they should do to kind of like create even opportunities to get into the legal sector. So a lot of them don't even want the money. They just want the opportunity so that they can start a career. I mean, I'm not recommending that they should be working for free for the firms, but it's really important that we think about them and we start communication with them rather than just talking within our own firms, because they're also struggling, and I think it's important for us as a community to support them.
Okay, sorry, thank you very much. And James and Katherine, did you want to offer any final observations, or shall we finish?
No, I would echo what Leena has said. I think that's a great point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Likewise, nothing further to add. Just thanks for having us.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I think this has been a fantastic discussion, and on behalf of myself and Alex and LexisNexis, and I'm sure everyone attending, thank you so much for joining us today to offer your thoughts. We will be producing and finalizing a recording of this webinar, and we will make it available on our website for anyone to watch again or to send to other people who would like to see it. And as mentioned before, it is also eligible for CPD credit for those that are claiming that. So thank you very much again, and enjoy the long weekend.
Thank you so much.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Goodbye.
everyone.